This is the Master Colorist series, part 2. That's my name, Tom Dispenza, and my cell phone number, which is also the hotline number. And you can reach me, look at the bottom of the page at either the Worldwide Hair Colorists or through Chromastic's websites. There's my 2 emails. And you do not have to be a Chromastics user for me to answer color questions for you. I will answer any that I possibly can. Okay, so here we go. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about dyes and couplers that we use to make hair coloring. We're going to talk about bleaching melanin, and hopefully you'll understand what bleaching melanin is all about and why a lot of things aren't as successful as they could be. Thirdly, we're going to talk about contributing and underlying pigment, depending upon what you call it. I don't care what you call it. And the fourth thing that we're going to talk about is the difference between mixing levels and working levels. Okay. Let's start with dyes and couplers. And remember, you can keep your questions on the topic we're talking about. There'll be plenty of time at the end for unusual questions, but here we go with dyes and couplers. First of all, these aren't the only dyes that are used in hair coloring, but these 4 are the most common. And you can see what p-phenylenediamine is PPD. That's what generally we know it as. And it's used to create all the different brown colors. And if you dilute it enough, it can become a blonde. However, no, let's just leave it at that. P-aminophenol is used to create golds and red-orange colors. And NN-bis, and that's a big word, hydroethyl p-phenylenediamine sulfate. Primarily, we use it to create blue and gray, blue coloring, blue violets, gray colors. And then p-toluenediamine sulfate is generally used to create golden browns, red, violet, and gray colors. And I'm going to show you a lot more as we go on. Now, this is not all of the couplers that we use. However, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 of the most common couplers. And it's not important that you understand what happens when you mix dyes and couplers together yet, but I will give you some examples. Now, look at what it says here. The primary chemical to dye hair brown is paraphenylediamine. You know it as PPD. Now, it's combined with couplers to form many of the different colors that we see in our hair when we're coloring hair. But here's 4 examples of what happens when you mix PPD with resorcinol. You get a greenish yellow brown. But when you mix PPD with M-aminophenol, you get a light brown color. When you mix PPD with p-aminoocresol, you get a dark red brown. And when you mix PPD with 1,5 dihydroalcohol hydroxynaphthalene, you get a blue-violet brown. Now, here's what's interesting. When you don't want any of these colors by themselves generally on the hair. So when we make PPD into a brown shade and we call it neutral, it's because we have more than one coupler. We have only one dye, PPD, but then we can use multiple couplers to get them. Yvette asked a question, and she said, are these what we call base or background? Yes and no. Let me go back, first of all, to the dyes. This is how we create a color. Now, it can be a, if it's a phenylenediamine and it's one of the browns, then it would be your base color or your neutral shade, depending upon what it is. If you want to call it background, because you then have you're creating a blended color, then the answer would be yes and no again, because background generally means you have an additional tone attached to the color. You don't have to. You can use certain dyes all by themselves without creating a background, in which case you have very, very vibrant hair colors. This was this one, and then this one. It's not unusual to have one dye and multiple couplers in a formula. That's what I was talking about when you wanted to create a neutral brown. You use PPD, but then you change the concentration depending upon the level that you want, and then you add multiple couplers, a warm one, a cool one, in order to create a perfect neutral formula. In pure tone colors, if you want to use just one pure tone for extremely vibrant color, then you mix just one dye and one coupler together, and you get an extremely vibrant tone. But blended colors, you don't know what's going to happen with blended colors, because blended colors have multiple dyes in one color. So instead of being neutral, instead of making neutral by just using one dye, a PPD, and then multiple couplers, you might end up, if you're a different way of making it would be to use two different dyes, a warm one and a cool one, and then use multiple couplers in order to get it to the neutral that you want to see. Now, here's an interesting fact. Most of people don't realize that PPD is not banned in any country in the world. However, the amount that you can use in hair color is regulated, and the maximum amount of PPD that you can put into any hair color formula in the United States is 6%. However, most hair colors formulas, most hair colors contain less than 1%. So we're far, far below what the maximum is that you can use. Now, one dye can give you multiple colors depending upon the coupler. Now here what I've done is I'm showing you p-aminophenol, and I'm mixing it depending upon the coupler I use. I can create a gold color, I can create a red-orange color, or I can create a very, an almost red-violet looking color, just depending upon the coupler. So once again, if I wanted to make a red color that was a soft red and more golden in appearance, then I'd just use a lot of the gold coupler and just a tiny bit of the red orange or the red violet. Now here, and here's, now look at these two dyes carefully. On the left is PPD. On the right is p-toluene diamine. It's one of the substitutes that manufacturers use when they want to say no PPD added. Now look at it carefully. The main body of the PPD and the main body of the p-toluene diamine are exactly the same. So what happens is that in the p-toluene diamine, you connect another dye over here, or possibly to the ends, but on the PPD, you don't have that extra arm extension. However, they both require you still do a patch test. So even though you're not using PPD in a formula, it's almost the same color formula that you're using. Now here, remember, one of the other new kickers is that people say, oh, we don't have PPD or resorcinol. Well, then they use the toluene diamine, and then they use methyl resorcinol. Once again, look at the two molecules. They're almost identical. So this is where manufacturers trick you into thinking that you have a much better product. However, you still have to do patch tests regardless of what anything says. And for those of you that have been told you don't need to do patch tests, read the packaging. Read the package that your color comes in, and it will always suggest that you do a patch test. Okay, before I go on to bleaching melanin, any questions at all about all of the things that we've covered so far on dyes and couplers? Okay, moving on. Let's talk about understanding and bleaching melanin. First of all, melanin is inside of a granule that's in your hair. The granules, if it's pure eumelanin, look sort of like this, which is the shape of a piece of rice, only obviously much, much smaller. If you have both eumelanin and pheomelanin in your hair, then you have a granule that's called a mixed melanin granule. And if you have only pheomelanin in your hair, you're a very, very bright blonde or redhead, then it's shaped like this. Notice also the size differential between them. Now, eumelanin is very easy to bleach. Pheomelanin, which is either red or yellow, is not easy to bleach. I'll explain as we go on. First of all, this represents a strand of hair, cuticle layer, cortex, medulla. If it had a medulla, it doesn't, all hair doesn't. But all these little black dots that you see are in fact the granules of hair color that are inside your hair. So these can be either the eumelanin, mixed melanins, or just plain pheomelanin. You don't know until you start breaking your hair down what they are, unless you have a lab and you can look at them with a scanning electron microscope. Now, in order to lighten natural hair color, the first thing we do is we dissolve the granule containing the melanin. Let me go back. That means we dissolve these little tiny black dots that you see. That's how we start the bleaching process. We dissolve the melanin by bursting open the granule, and that happens because we're using an alkaline mixture. The alkaline mixture not only makes your hair swell, but it also causes the granule that's holding your hair color inside it swells up, it bursts open, and then you disperse the melanin. So let me go back to, we dissolve the granule containing the melanin. Then when the granule is dissolved, the melanin is solubilized, that means made into a liquid, and it disperses throughout the entire strand of hair. The dispersed melanin becomes a reddish brown solution, which means your hair then looks warmer than it did before you put any sort of a lightening agent on your hair. So now it looks like this. Notice all the little granules are gone. They burst open. They're not really gone, but they just burst open. But all of the melanin spread throughout all of your hair, and now your hair appears to have a reddish cast. The peroxide, notice I said peroxide, not ammonia, then breaks up the melanin units, and the color slowly fades away. So as you make the melanin, the strand of melanin smaller and smaller, by the peroxide does this, then the color slowly fades from the hair. But not only does it fade from the hair, it goes through those stages of lightening that we see, where first you have a very reddish brown, then it's an orange color, then it becomes a golden color, goes on and on and on. Eventually, the solution becomes colorless when the units are broken down into small, colorless materials. Now, here's the interesting part. Pheomelanin is not broken down by an alkaline hydrogen peroxide solution, even when you mix it with persulfates. So what happens is that you can burst open the granule, but unless there's new technology that I'm unaware of, you always have pheomelanin. If it's in your hair, it's always in your hair, and you have to take consideration of the pheomelanin before you create your hair color formula. Now, questions before we, okay. Here, Carrie asked, is there a safe color? Well, safe is a very subjective term. We've done thousands and thousands of hours of testing hair color. Everybody has through many, many, many years. And so safe would mean changes your hair color, but doesn't destroy your hair or your scalp. Then yes, you could call hair color safe. Vet said, is there any difference between the two except for the extra arm? Do each color differently? Does one cause more reaction than the other? This is a very good question, Yvette. First of all, when we were looking at the dyes and the couplers, and we substituted PPD, we substituted p-toluene for that. Then it's not, generally you have a warmer color because the p-toluene is primarily designed for making golden brown shades. You also have less gray coverage when you eliminate PPD from a formula because you can't get the real dark colors that we want to see. If you're talking about a level 2 or black colors, you can't get them without using PPD. Okay. So the answer is there is definitely a slight difference, primarily in tonal value and in depth. Dominica said, resorcinol, it has a little stick extra sticking out of it. Does this mean it's easier? No, it does not mean it's easier to attach to other chemicals. What happens is when we add the peroxide to the formula mixture, we not only oxidize the dyes, we also create the form of the dye when it has when it can stick to another item. However, the sticking to is different for all the different chemicals. So in other words, if you have 2 couplers and only 1 dye, they don't adhere equally. You have to adjust your formula. However, no, that I think that answered your question. Yvette said she was speaking of resorcinol. Let me go back and see. The difference between them is that one is called resorcinol and one is not. It has a slightly different name because it does things slightly differently. I don't know. Okay. Any more questions about the dyes and the couplers? Then we're going to go on to contributing and underlying pigment. I find this fascinating, this part. First of all, contributing pigment. Now pay attention here. Depending upon the color formula you're applying to the hair, the contributing pigment can be your natural hair color, your altered natural hair color. It could be previously colored hair or hair that has been bleached. Now, all of these contribute to different ways to formulas, depending upon what the formula is. Now, contributing pigment is created, and it's created by bleaching or lightening the natural hair color. So it's also created, created and changed by bleaching or lightening color treated hair. So contributing pigment isn't there unless, no, I'm going to confuse you. Ignore that. Ignore that. Let me keep going. Now, the tone and depth of the contributing pigment must be taken into consideration when you're formulating. Oh, wait a minute. I have to go back here. Yvette said, so resorcinol and 2-methyl-resorcinol is responsible for making sure hair color sticks to the hair. Absolutely no, not true. The reason that hair color becomes more permanent is not because of the coupler, but because the dyes themselves become larger and larger inside the hair and they're trapped there. So it doesn't matter, because you can have hair color that has no resorcinol and no methyl resorcinol in it, and it still goes into the hair and it swells. So, right. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. The tone and depth of contributing pigment must be taken into consideration when formulating. Now, you've got to determine the tone and depth before you apply anything to the hair. So it becomes, so you're thinking in advance, so you don't end up with bad hair color. Now, underlying pigment. This is so confusing to so many people. Underlying pigment does not exist. It is created. And when it's created by lightening the natural melanin in your hair. And then you see all the stages of lightening. Underlying pigment is created by bursting open the pigment granule and dispersing the pigment and then destroying the pigment through the bleaching, which is also known as a lightening process. As the melanin is destroyed, it reflects light differently. And we see what we refer to as underlying pigment. However, it's not underlying, it's created, and it's created by the process of bleaching or lightening melanin. Okay, now Luke said, when I say contributing pigment, you mean pigment that is created when you react permanent color with permanent hair color with natural color. That's one of them, but let me go back here and let me explain something a little bit better here. Okay. Now, if I'm using a deposit only hair color, then the natural hair color contributes to the color formula. If I'm using a permanent hair color that lightens and deposits color, then it's the altered natural color that becomes part of the formula. If I'm working on previously colored hair and the hair, let's say the hair is orange looking, and I want to neutralize the orange, then I put either a blue violet or a green color on the hair, and I neutralize it. However, if I'm using a permanent color, it doesn't lighten the the color that's in the hair, but what it will do is it will attack the natural melanin that's left in the hair. And when I say hair that has been bleached, it means the hair can be any color whatsoever, from reddish brown all the way to pale yellow, which is the final stage when there's no more color left in the hair. Carrie says, I have seen some colorists having trouble with their bleach lightener and foils, leaving small pencil dot size or a little larger dark spots when they check the foil. Are you familiar with this happening? Okay, now, yes, I have seen it. And I've actually had it happen to myself. And there's a number of reasons for it. First of all, let me get a sip of. First of all, if the bleaching product is not applied properly, there can be little spots that are left out on the hair, number one. Number two, if there's something contaminating the bleach or the hair itself, then certain areas are not affected by the color. And generally, if you wipe that foil, if you wipe it off and reapply, you will end up getting a more even hair color. But generally, it's not anything that happens because of the brand of color, because all hair color is made of the same stuff. No matter who makes it in the whole world, it's all made from the same stuff. But it could be that that hair had something in it that could be causing it, including something that was stuck in the hair because of the water that you're using. That's why I always recommend you clarify the client before you do any sort of hair coloring or highlighting on the hair. And you do not dry it. You just simply towel dry it real well. Then you get much better, you generally get much better result. So Yvette now says, when we create the underlying pigment, oh, darn. When we create the underlying pigment, we don't know 100% what it will be until it happens. Can someone pull more warmth than the next? Yeah, absolutely. And it has to do with there's a bunch of things that affect how much warmth you pull. First of all, whether you have mixed melanin or just pheomelanin. Huge difference. Number two, the texture of the hair. The larger the texture, the more color it takes to make the same level. So that hair always looks brassier as you're lightening it. So you have to adjust your color formula for that. I'll give examples of the formulas in other webinars. There's some that are already done. I'll tell you about them in a second. And thirdly, skin tone. The darker your skin tone, generally, the more gold in your skin, so you can't lighten a person completely without destroying the hair. So texture, and eye color. The darker the eye color, the more difficult and the redder the hair color will look. The lightened hair will look when you lighten the hair, because of the very dark brown eyes. Let me see, where were we? Okay. Dominica, bleached. Many times you've had clients bleached highlights get dark over the months after the process. Is this possible for the granules of melanin to reattach to the hair, causing the color of the highlights to get darker? Now, if it's eumelanin, no, because you destroyed that melanin and it's gone. It can't come back. However, anyone who's been doing highlights on red hair know that sometimes the gold will change back into a red color. We don't understand it completely in the lab, but yes, we've seen it happen. Also, bleached hair gets darker because of clients are using, number one, they're using sulfate-free shampoo on highlights, whereas they should not be. They should be using clarifying shampoo to keep their highlights fresh and sharp. And that's it's okay to use clarifying shampoo regularly at home, providing it has a lower pH. Okay, I'm going to go on after melanin. I'm going to go on now to mixing level versus working level. If everybody's ready, here we go. When you're mixing hair colors, there's a difference between the color that you mix and the level that you apply. So even though you might be mixing one level, it's very different than when you apply it to the hair. Now, we've always been taught that if you use 45 grams of 4G and 15 grams of 4RO, it gives us a final color level of 4. And it is absolutely wrong. Wrong. And I'm going to explain here in a second. And if you think about what's something that we do in our kitchen, it'll make it very much easier for everyone to understand. So here we go. First of all, this contains black coffee. This is plain old milk. When you mix coffee with milk, you get a lighter version of the coffee. So you added milk to the coffee, you diluted the concentration of the dye because of the added milk. So therefore, you have less concentration and your color becomes lighter. Let me go to another slide. Now, think of milk as a tube of hair color. And the way that we create all the different levels from black to lightest blonde is we put in, we could start with black. We add a little bit of milk to the black and it becomes dark brown. We add a little more milk and it becomes light brown. We add more milk, it becomes blonde. You see what's happening here? The more clear or milk you add to a formula, it gets lighter and lighter. So think about this black color as pure PPD. So when we add stop. Don't think of it as PPD. Think of it as if I add just a little bit of the color, the dye and the coupler, just a tiny bit to this glass of milk, it becomes level 10N because I'm using neutral. Then it becomes level 8N. Then it becomes level 6N. You can see the concentration of dye is making the color get darker. But what happens if I add milk to light brown, right? So now I have milk, I have a cup that has light brown coffee in it, and I add the milk to it, and it becomes even lighter. So now it went from a 4 to a 5. This is what happens when you're doing hair color. When you add 15 grams, this is an approximate, when you add approximately 15 grams of any color that is different to your formula. Now, let me explain that a little bit further. Remember, mixing level describes the levels you combine to create a formula. Working level describes the altered levels you created and then you apply to the hair. Now, when you add 15 grams of any color that's different to a formula, the formula becomes 1 level lighter. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's clear, whether it's a tone, it doesn't matter as long as it's different than the color that you're using. It doesn't matter whether it's permanent, deposit only, liquid color. It doesn't matter. They all become 1 level lighter. But unfortunately, if you're working with pre-blended colors, you don't know what's going to happen because you don't know what's in the tube. Oh, so Martin said 15 grams of 1N to 45 grams of clear. No, unfortunately, it doesn't, because it gives you closer to a medium brown. And the reason, Martin, is because black is so intense. There's so much dye in it. Black is the exception. So don't think about dark brown and lighter. So now, look at this. If I'm mixing 45 grams of 4G and 15 grams of 4RO, now, here's what really happens. The working formula becomes 5G7RO, which, if you're using a numerical system, becomes 5.35. Now, here's why. Read this last sentence. The background is the 5G. The tone is the 7RO. But here's why. When you added 15 grams of 4RO was added to the 4G, the 4G, remember, it's different. It's not gold, so it's red-orange. And don't think that red-orange is made up of gold and red, because it's not. It's a single dye. So when you added 15 grams of red-orange to the 4G, it was something different. G is different than red-orange. So the G becomes diluted to 1 level lighter. So now it's 5G. So it becomes 5.3, 5G. However, the 4RO is also diluted by the 4G. So 45 grams of 4G can be represented as 15 plus 15 plus 15, 345. So therefore, the 4RO jumps up 1 level, 2 levels, 3 levels, and now it's 7RO. So that's why you've got your golden brown base, your lightest golden brown, or darkest golden blonde, whatever you want to call it. You've got gold is your primary shade. And then you have your secondary shade, which is red orange. So that's where it came from. Oh, all right. Now, before I go any further, now Yvette said, is this because the amount of ammonia in each tube and dye deposition being different, so you end up upping the ammonia? I don't know what you're referring to there, Yvette. You said, is this because, but I didn't catch it till just now. So I don't know what you were talking about. However, let's talk about ammonia. Ammonia, depending upon the hair color, generally your darkest colors, your black and your darkest brown, have no or very, very little ammonia in them. Your mid-range colors from 3 to 5 have generally more ammonia than the black or darkest brown, but less than any blonde shades. And then 10 would have your highest ammonia unless you're working with just tubes of pure that contain pure ammonia, such as high lift or XL cream. Oh, Guy, you were not taught this in beauty school. Yeah, well, yeah, I understand that. It's because nobody teaches this in beauty school, because most instructors don't know it. How is RO a 3-5? What's the 5? No, there are no numbers. That was 3 is gold, 5 is red, is a small amount of red. But I do not use any numbers ever. I only work with the tones themselves. So that was European. This is a European number system. This is 5 gold, and this is European gold and red. That's what these mean. However, it's not the same for all different systems, because red is not the same in all the different dye systems in Europe. Martin, so if you're missing, if I'm missing 5 grams of gold or green to get a level 4, what's missing? No, you're not missing anything, Martin. The problem is that black color has a much more higher concentration of dye. You're not missing anything from the color. You're just super high concentration. So consequently, you don't get the same results from black color as you do from any other. I'm only talking about black. Sharon, what happens when you add 15 grams of XL cream to lighten one shade? Yeah, it's exactly what it does. If you add 15 grams of clear XL cream to any shade whatsoever, it jumps up one level, but the tone remains exactly the same, but just a lighter version of it. Good, Martin. So now, here's something that's coming up in the near future. Now, I'm going to be doing a podcast with Dennis Gephardt. Dennis and I have been friends for many, many, many years. Now, however you get your podcast, assuming that you that you do listen to them occasionally, just simply go to whatever you get your podcast, plug in Guru in Your Ear, and on March 31st, oh, forget this time. This is wrong. You can do it at any time. You can see a podcast at any time going onwards from March 31st. Ignore the times. And here, now, for anybody who's interested in the 2022 Master Color series, the entire series is available at the Worldwide Hair Colorists Association.org website. Now, you just go to the website, you click on Master Colorist, and all the videos will appear. You do not have to join the group to look at them. You can watch all of them for free. I also have another series that's, remember that if you go to Facebook, I have Facebook and then search Tom Dispenza. I have, no, excuse me, not Facebook, YouTube. Go to YouTube, and I have more than 60 videos on YouTube. Just search Tom Dispenza, join the group if you want. And there are more than 60 all hair color videos. And once again, no charge to watch any of them. Now, in the next part 3, I'm going to talk about the level system, where it comes from and how we determine it, why eye and skin tone are important, why texture is incredibly important when hair color, and I'm going to talk about translucent and opaque versions of the same color. Most people don't realize that one color has 4 different versions. Yeah, that's the difference between translucent versus opaque. I'm talking about one level of color. That's going to be April 10th, and you'll be able to sign up for this tomorrow. I'll put it up on the Facebook. And here is the Guru in Your Ear podcast. Once again, it's March 31st. Remember, you could do it at any time you want, depending upon whether you use Spotify, Anchor, Apple, or Google. It doesn't matter. It's on all of them. Got it? Okay, guys, guess what? Oh, I forgot this part. Becoming a master colorist. Oh, Luke said he thought I was confusing everybody with the example of milk and coffee. I'll take that under consideration, and we'll adjust it. If your levels are calibrated, how can mixing 2 level 4s produce a level 5 color without raising the developer or desaturating the tone? It's very, very easy. You're diluting the 2, you're diluting the 4 with a different tone, because even though they're both level 4, they do not represent the same color. They're 2 different colors. I know it's very difficult, Trey. I think, if I remember correctly, Trey, you've got a copy of the color book. Go back and look at it. If not, go to YouTube and look for the coloring system. And remember, calibrated does not mean all levels are created equal. Calibrated generally refers to two different things, a calibrated ammonia and a calibrated level, but the level doesn't mean that it's equivalent between each level. In other words, it's not a uniform system. So you don't have double the dye load between a 10 and a 9. You don't double the dye load between a 9 and an 8. That's a big falsehood about calibration. Calibration means the exact amount of color to create the level that you produce. Trey, call me on my phone and I'll explain it for you in depth.